The morning sun caught on the wet glass walls of the corporate tower like fire on broken ice, and Ayaan Rafiq froze with a mop in his trembling hands when he saw the woman standing on the steps below. Because some faces are not meant to return after one careless night. Some moments are supposed to disappear quietly into shame and memory. But there she was, alive and real in the bright daylight. And the truth he had tried to bury was suddenly standing in front of the building he cleaned every single morning. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and silent heroes who survive storms no one sees, take a moment right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel Whisper Tales 3. Because stories like this only live when hearts choose to listen. Ayaan had learned to move through the world without being noticed. He arrived before sunrise, long before the executives and assistants filled the glass halls with perfume and sharp voices. His job as a cleaner in one of the most expensive business towers in the city barely paid the rent of a single cramped room near the bus depot, but it paid enough to keep his 6-year-old son, Xavier, in school and fed. Daytime was his battlefield. He worked while sunlight poured through marble floors, while security guards nodded at him without learning his name, while posters of innovation and leadership hung on walls that had never known hunger. Every break he took was spent checking his phone, waiting for messages from the elderly neighbor who watched his son during the day, hoping there would be no emergency he could not afford. The night that changed everything had never been planned. It happened after a brutal double shift, after an eviction notice slipped under his door like a threat he could not answer, after a birthday cupcake bought with his last coins for Xavier because fathers are not allowed to fail on their child's birthday. Ayaan had walked into a quiet rooftop cafe to escape the noise in his head, and he had found a woman alone at a corner table, eyes glassy with exhaustion and alcohol, shoulders tight with the weight of a life no one had bothered to understand. Her name, he would later learn, was Celine Kadir, the newly appointed CEO of the very company whose floors he scrubbed. That night had been soft and human, full of broken laughter and shared loneliness, two strangers leaning into warmth because both had forgotten what it felt like to be held by something gentle. Nothing graphic, nothing reckless, just a fragile moment between two people who had stopped believing they deserved kindness. By morning, guilt crushed him harder than the cold pavement outside his apartment. He had slipped out quietly, ashamed of his worn shoes and borrowed confidence, convinced that whatever existed between them belonged only to the dark. He never imagined their lives were already connected by elevators, security badges, and invisible class lines he crossed with a mop. Now Celine stood at the tower entrance in a tailored white suit, sunlight flooding her sharp posture, her presence commanding the entire courtyard without effort. Ayaan watched from behind a decorative plant, heart racing, panic curling in his chest like smoke. He tried to disappear, but some storms are sent to find you no matter how quietly you live. That same day, rumors spread faster than dust in sunlight. The company was cutting contracts. Outsourced services were being reviewed. A new leadership vision demanded efficiency. Ayaan heard the words while cleaning the hallway outside the executive offices, his fingers tightening around the handle of his cart. He had already calculated how many meals were left in his pantry. He had already counted the days before the landlord's patience expired. Losing this job would not be inconvenience, it would be collapse. For days, Celine passed through the building like a distant star, surrounded by advisors, her face unreadable, her eyes rarely lifting from her tablet. And yet, every time she walked by, Ayaan felt a silent gravity pull at his chest. He was not invisible to her. He could feel it in the way her steps slowed for half a second whenever she crossed the lobby he cleaned, in the way her eyes flickered briefly toward his name stitched crookedly on his uniform. The call came during lunch hour. Human Resources requested to see him. His hands shook as he wiped them on his trousers, already preparing his apology for existing. He had practiced it his whole life. Inside the office, Celine was seated beside a manager and a legal advisor. The glass walls reflected the city like a distant dream. She looked different up close in daylight, less untouchable, more tired, shadows soft beneath her eyes. Ayaan's fear nearly swallowed him when the manager explained the review process, the restructuring, the possibility of ending contracts that no longer fit the company's evolving needs. But something unexpected happened. Celine interrupted. Her voice was steady, professional, and strangely warm. She spoke about dignity in labor, about unseen work that kept every system alive, about how leadership without humanity was simply decoration. She presented data she had personally gathered from security logs and maintenance schedules, pointing out that Ayaan had covered multiple floors during understaffed weeks, had volunteered overtime during electrical repairs, and had never missed a single shift in 18 months. His file, once invisible, had suddenly become visible. The meeting ended with a new arrangement. His position was secure, his hours were stabilized, and something else quietly added at the bottom of the page made his chest tighten in disbelief. A scholarship partnership for dependents of essential staff, approved and funded immediately. Ayaan walked out into the hallway like a man learning to breathe again. That afternoon, sunlight flooded the lobby as Celine crossed it alone. She stopped near the fountain where water glided over stone like glass. She did not speak to him. There was no need. Their eyes met for only a second, but inside that moment lived an apology, a thank you, and a promise neither could afford to say aloud. Power had finally chosen kindness, not because of what happened one night on a rooftop, but because something human had survived long enough to change the morning. The real transformation arrived weeks later, in the bright middle of an ordinary day. Xavier stood beside Ayaan in the same lobby, holding a thin envelope with trembling hands. The scholarship letter confirmed full tuition support, school supplies, and mentorship opportunities through the company's new outreach program. His son's eyes sparkled with a future Ayaan had only ever imagined in quiet prayers. The building that once swallowed him whole had somehow opened a door instead. But the story was not about rescue. It was about courage on both sides of invisible walls. Celine faced brutal resistance from board members who accused her of emotional leadership and weak priorities. She fought quietly, professionally, and relentlessly, protecting programs that served cleaners, guards, cafeteria workers, and delivery staff. Day by day, the tower became less silent. People began greeting each other by name. Break rooms filled with cautious laughter. The invisible lines softened, and Ayaan learned something just as powerful. He learned that dignity is not granted by titles, it is defended by choices. He studied at night after putting Xavier to sleep, enrolling in a facility management certification offered through the same outreach initiative. His exhaustion did not disappear, but his despair slowly loosened its grip. Near the end of one long bright afternoon, Ayaan stood by the window on the upper maintenance floor, watching the city breathe under the sun. He realized that sometimes life does not change because someone saves you. It changes because someone finally sees you, and you decide to stop hiding from that light. If this story has touched your heart, if it reminded you that kindness still survives in unexpected places, please take a moment now to like, share, and engage with this video, because every small action helps stories of hope reach someone who might need them today. Special request before we end. Please drop a heartfelt comment and tell us what part of this story moved you the most. As the sun drifted lower and shadows softened across the glass towers, Ayaan held his son's hand and stepped forward into a future that no longer felt impossible. Knowing that one fragile night, one honest choice, and one brave leader had quietly turned survival into something brighter. Something finally worthy of daylight.